I now call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 34, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. This meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on February 1, 2022. The committee is resuming its study of science at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. We will begin with a panel of witnesses from Atlantic Canada, followed by a panel with officials from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans in the second hour. Before we proceed, I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English or French. For those in the room, of course, you can use the earpiece to select the desired channel. Please address all comments through the chair. Finally, a reminder that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. I would like to welcome our first panel of witnesses, appearing as an individual, of course, online. Oh no, here in person. Good. Morley Knight, former Assistant Deputy Minister, Fisheries Policy, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, retired. And representing 4VN Management Board, we have Mr. Herb Nash, President, who I believe is online. Thank you for taking the time to appear today. You will each have up to 5 minutes for an opening statement, and I will invite Mr. Nash to begin, please. Mr. Nash?
Yes, thank you for inviting me on. I only got the notice yesterday afternoon, so I never had much time to prepare too much for it, but I've been involved in the fisheries since I was 13. I quit school and went fishing. I'm 71 now, and I'm still at it. And it's a good life, and I liked it. We had good times. We had bad times over the years, but if you worked hard enough, you always made a living at it. Sometimes you worked hard and you wanted to, but that's part of fishing. And I was hoping to get to see other people first, so I know what you were expecting, but I didn't. I'm the first one, but I did meet in front with I'm not sure now, it was MPs or senators back around the late 80s, early 90s with Mike Belleville, and we were in Ottawa at that time. We spent about 3 hours. They asked us questions and that, and they stayed after their time, shook hands with us and everything else for it. So I've been around the fishery, and I've been representing fishermen since 1973. The first groundfish meeting in this area took place, and I was at it, and I've been at the groundfish meetings ever since then. So I don't have a whole lot of education, but I got a whole lot of knowledge about the fishery. So other than that, I'm just, any questions you want to ask, I'll answer them best I can.
Thank you for that, Mr. Nash, and I'm sure we'll get to hear a lot of answers when the questioning round starts. We'll now go to Mr. Knight for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to appear before your committee and to speak to your study on science. In my presentation, I'll draw on my experience working in DFO in senior level positions as a regional director of fisheries management in St. John's, as a director general in Ottawa of resource management, as a regional director general in Moncton and in Halifax, and finally, as you noted, as the assistant deputy minister of fisheries policy here in Ottawa. I've since retired, and since I've retired, I have continued to do some work with some Indigenous organizations and elsewhere outside the country on fisheries management. So I've continued my interest. So in all of these roles, I've worked closely with DFO Science. To begin with, I'll share some thoughts on the DFO Science program. I can tell you with certainty that at DFO there are hundreds of great scientists who are dedicated to their work and work countless hours every day beyond their regular workday. DFO scientists are internationally recognized as some of the best fishery scientists in the world. The Canadian science program is envied by most fishing nations, and the resources poured into science in Canada are likely only equaled by a handful of countries around the world. Yet, DFO science is often unable to produce science advice adequate for the management of fishery. So, what is wrong? I'll touch on 4 areas that I would like to address about the science that DFO produces and the impacts of that. One is the lack of results. Surveys don't get done. There are continual problems with ships that are broken down or get deployed to other programs at times when surveys need to be completed. So I'm confident you've heard lots about this from other witnesses, so I won't dwell on that point anymore, but I would be happy to answer any questions you may have about that. Results don't always get analyzed on a timely basis, and therefore the data is incomplete or outdated by the time it is used. 2, science programs and scientists are married to theoretical processes and models. These processes fall apart when a survey doesn't get completed or when the models just aren't producing the results consistent with a glaring body of evidence that just shows the models just aren't producing a reality. Models use data such as abundance, size at age, maturity, natural mortality, etc., as well as some judgments by scientists, but can never account for all of the variables, such, for example, as unknown changes in the size at maturity. The models are not always right. 3, reliance on only science source information. Available information is not always included in the output or in the models, including logbook data or observer data. There's not enough emphasis on getting harvesters to collect data and samples. Stock status reports are produced without due consideration of anecdotal information from fish harvesters and indigenous groups about the health of the stock. And fourthly, poor communications. Science needs to spend more time communicating with fish harvesters and spending time with them in the fishing environment. I have to say that some regions do better at this than others, and some sectors in some regions do better. Efforts must be taken to improve the flow of information from science about how they do their work and how they reach their conclusions, as well as the flow of information from fish harvesters to science about what they are seeing on the water. This would help diminish the gap between the views of fish harvesters and science, and likely improve science over time, and undoubtedly increase the confidence in science advice. So I'll now move to how can science provide better advice for fisheries management. And again, I have 4 points. Practical approaches that can use available information in a given year or cycle that aren't hamstrung if some pieces of the puzzle don't fall into place, such as a trawl survey not getting done. 2, more reliance on partnerships with fish harvesters and the fishing industry to gather information for science. 3, better use of information and advice from harvesters in developing science and less emphasis on trawl surveys and computer models. 4, less prescriptive advice and attempting to provide a precise biomass estimate, and more emphasis on general advice on which direction a stock is moving in and what measures might improve the health of a stock, such as measures to protect juvenile fish or spawning fish. In conclusion, I believe that DFO has some of the best fishery scientists in the world, and our science program at DFO is probably one of the best in the world as well. I don't think we need to make sweeping changes, but some things need to be addressed. We need to ensure that ships that science need to do their work are operating, and they should be made a priority to get the science done, and people should be held accountable for making sure that that program gets delivered. Secondly, we should make science programs more pragmatic and resilient, more inclusive, to include all of the available information, including that from fish harvesters, and ensuring there's always a product available, even if a trawl survey doesn't get done. Thirdly, leadership capacity needs to be improved so that the science programs are properly led in the direction that they need to go. And finally, improved communications with the fishing industry, Indigenous groups, and other stakeholders are a must. This concludes my opening remarks, and I'd be happy to try and answer some of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. We'll now go to our first round of questioning. We'll first go to Mr. Small for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, I want to thank all the members of this committee for agreeing to extra meetings to gather as much information as possible for this fisheries science study. And I'd like to thank the witnesses for taking time out of their busy schedules to come in and help us out here today. Theoretically, fisheries management decisions are to be made based on solid science, of course. Livelihoods are impacted, and in fact, the GDP of our nation are impacted by decisions made based on scientific evidence. Mr. Chair, my question is to Mr. Knight. In your experience, have you encountered situations where you thought scientific evidence may be questionable? And have you ever had to make management decisions based on science that, in your own mind, you might have questioned?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a very good question. I can tell you without hesitation that I've had to make many difficult decisions as a Regional Director General on a total allowable catch when I wasn't confident that the science advice was pointing in the right direction. Sometimes it was, but there are other examples when it definitely was not. History showed that it was not. I did bring an example with me that I'd like to offer to the committee that it actually happened in the backyard of the riding of MP Kilaway, and the other witness, Mr. Nash, might actually be aware of it. This happened when I was the Regional Director General in the Maritimes region, where I was required to set the total allowable catch for the snow crab fishery for the area east of Sydney and Glace Bay. In 2016, there was a recommendation from science for a drastic reduction in the total allowable catch, cutting it from 620 tonne in 2015 down to 286 tonne in 2016, more than a 50% reduction from the previous year. By the time the recommendation for the TAC came to me, it had been reviewed by the Industry Advisory Committee, and the fish harvesters had offered their input on it. Fish harvesters at that time were in a state of disbelief after having a very strong fishery in 2015 with very good catch rates and widespread abundance. Some of them had called me and expressed their grave concern, noting that they saw no evidence to support the drastic reduction being suggested, and that they would not be able to make their vessel payments and survive on that kind of quota. I met with the Regional Director of Science and went over the science recommendation with him. Having had 30-plus years of experience in managing crab stocks at that time in Newfoundland, Labrador region and in the Gulf region, I was skeptical about the validity of the advice, and I asked the Regional Director of Science to have it reviewed. I was advised that the science had been done and peer-reviewed, and there was nothing else to look at, and we shouldn't ask to review it because we would be questioning science. So I very reluctantly approved the TAC at 286 tons. The fishery in 2016 was short-lived, with the very small quota being taken very quickly with very high catch rates. The following year, in 2017, the TAC recommendation was to set the quota at 825 tons, or 335% of the TAC for 2016. I raised the issue with the Regional Director of Science, and the only explanation was that the 2016 survey must have missed a crab. Noteworthy is the fact that the only time in the past decade that the TAC dropped below 620 tonne was in 2016 at that 286-ton level. In 2022, the TAC was 978.75 ton. That's quite the precision. So I use this as an example not to single out this unfortunate situation that surely caused a lot of unnecessary grief and stress and economic loss to the fish harvesters in that area, but as an illustration of how models and processes can go wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. And in your opinion, do you think that fish harvesters can play more of a role in gathering of scientific evidence? Because I know the industry stakeholders have been asking for more involvement in gathering scientific data to help managers and help the science part of scientists and DFO provide advice to managers. Are the harvesters and the stakeholders correct in saying that they could be a major part of gathering scientific data?
Thank you, Mr. Small. Mr. Chair, I think they can participate in a more fulsome manner. There are some really good examples out there where fish harvesters participate in the collection of science. It occurs in some of the herring fisheries. It occurs in many of the crab fisheries. And it occurs in some of the inshore small boat fisheries, right on up to the Northern Shrimp offshore fleet, where the Northern Shrimp Research Fund gathers data and collects evidence for the management of the Northern Shrimp stock. But I think these examples can be expanded on, and I think in these cases there would be less gaps in the data. I also think there should be greater reliance on the data collected by the fish harvesters. I think there's probably too much skepticism about the data that comes from the fishery, but I think the fish harvesters can collect the data that provides what the scientists need to produce the results.
Thank you, Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Small. It's gone over some on the questioning. We'll now go to Mr. Kellaway for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses today, and it's great to see everyone here as well that make up this committee. I'm going to have two questions, which works out well because there's two witnesses. The first one's to Herb, and it's nice to see you, Herb, especially after Hurricane Fiona. Hopefully you're doing okay. And in your opening remarks, you talked about your experience in the fishery, and just to digress for about 20 seconds, but there was a book written by Dave Dingwall about the toughest and most profound negotiators he had the chance to work with, and there was a lot of notable people, and a lot of people across North America, a lot of CEOs, and there's Herb Nash. That is one of the most progressive negotiators that Dingwall had a chance to work with and probably tangle with from time to time as well. So I'm wondering if you can, Herb, talk to us about, the 4 VN Management Society, how it works in terms of focusing on the sustainable fishery side, things that you've learned that has worked well, but things that we've heard some common themes here, and you're starting to hear it already around the importance and necessity to really double down, triple down on working with fish harvesters when it comes to a whole host of things related to intel in the ocean. So I wonder if you can give us a little bit about what's worked from your perspective over 60 years of working in the fishery, and how best can we work with fishers to strengthen that partnership in terms of information in the sea that's so important in terms of making real profound decisions.
The best way you could work with us is by being available to us to talk to, which I got to say you were excellent. When anytime I want to meet you, you'd make time for me. And our other MPs along the way, like I always was friends with them, and we talk civilized. Like I'm representing a bunch of fishermen that they don't understand some of the stuff, but they want to go fishing and catch as much as they can. It don't work that way. But like we heard Mr. Moore, which I know from meetings myself, me and Robert Courtney met him many times in our meetings, and like you said, they did cut the crab down. We knew it shouldn't have went down, but we can only argue so much, and it went down. But ever since then, it picked up. This year, my boat was added, and the stocks were excellent. There's times there that we had 105 traps out for 2 licenses. Like you had a permit and a half, so we had 105 traps out. And sometimes how anywhere from 60 to 70 traps, and they'd be on their way in with 58,000 pounds. That's what my boat would hold in. Like I have a wet well aboard there and in water that we can carry 58,000 pounds in water. So we'd be in, and we'd load the boat in less than a day. So there is lots of crab there. I'm not saying put the quota up or nothing else, but I'm just saying that the fishery is helpful. And in Fort Bien, in the ground fishery, like it started off, used to be 2 of us go to meetings in Ottawa and Halifax, and that was always me and Robert Courtney. And since he passed away, I'm pretty well the only one that does go to them now, but I'm president of our Fort Bien Sentinel fishery, and I pretty well been president a couple of years. Robert took it and gave me a break. I went vice president, but between me and him, I think we were president ever since it started. No one else wanted to take it because you get too many fishermen ground at you if it's something they don't like. But we got to do what we think is best and hope whatever the majority want to go along with and that. But this year is a really bad year for halibut in our area. This is the worst year that I ever seen yet. I don't know why. It's just this year's bad for it, but other years were good, and it may pick up before the year's out, but it don't really look like that. But
Okay.
One other spot I like to mention about in Fort Bien, we had a big area of our halibut grounds made into an MPA this year, or taken away from us. We're not allowed to fish there no more. The only reason I can see personally is
Just a second now, Mr. Nash. I got somebody with their hand up here. 1 second.
yeah.
De l'interprétation, les interprètes ont de la difficulté.
The interpreters are having trouble hearing and interpreting the remarks from Mr. Nash.
And not saying you're speaking fast, but it's the interpreters are not keeping up with you to be able to interpret it. So if you could just speak a little slower and clearer, maybe move your mic up a little bit instead of right in front of your mouth like it is.
And Herbert's mic, I'm wondering if, I want to get a question into Mr. Morley, so I'm wondering if you can get to some of the main points that I know you want to make, and then we'll try to get into a question or two for Mr. Morley, if that's possible.
You want me to continue?
Yeah, if you can continue and just maybe finish up your point there, and then we'll just move quickly on to Mr. Morley.
Yeah, the point I want to bring up now is in Fort BSW, where we do a lot of halibut fishing. Like it's from Gleis Bay, it's probably 110 to 130 miles out there, 140 miles where we fish. But this year they took it from us, a big area, and they just took all along the stone fence and along the Gully Cove there where we fished, and we got history there for years and everything, and they took it from us this year. And the only thing I can see that's going on, there's cable getting laid coming across the ocean and coming in that way. And I'm led to believe that we got kicked out of there so this cable could go there. And like our hooks ain't going to haul up one of them cables anyway. It's sort of like no more than a 16th of an inch thick, so it ain't going to haul up dead weight very far before it breaks. It's only string, it's not wire or nothing. So our hook is on that, and our hook is only a small hook, even smaller than that. So like there's no way that we're going to haul up a cable that's coming across the ocean, but that's the only reason. And they took an area that was, I would say, 8 times bigger than what they need just for that cable. So like, not only are we having a hard time catching fish, DFO or the government is making it harder for us when they close such a big area. And we had meetings on it, and nobody at that meeting at the fishermen agreed with it. We all disagreed with it. You know, if a cable got to go there, but you close a mile or a couple mile area, put a cable down is all you got to do. We took cables in across the ocean there a couple years ago in this area in 4BN. And, you know, we marked off a 2-mile area that we don't go handy the cable. And there's no trouble since then. So we can work around cables. We're proving it for BN when you run the cable in the Point of Coney. And there hasn't been a word negative about
Thanks.
it yet.
Sorry, Herb, I think we're pressed for time here, but appreciate your feedback.
I'm way over time. Go to Madame Debienne for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Nash. What you're telling us is very interesting because we know that you are in the middle of it in this reality. I'd like to salute you for your passion for the fishery and for your dedication and hard work, for taking the means you have available to you to do this work. You have consulted with members, with people over the years, so thank you very much for coming today. I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Knight. Now, I'm concerned, based on what we've been hearing over the past few sessions here. I'm concerned about the impact the scientists are having, scientists who are focusing on social sciences. When DFO makes a decision, for example, on the closure of a fishery with mackerel and herring, for example, recently, there isn't much of there isn't much consideration of the families or the communities that are devastated, and there's a lack of predictability, a lack of support following the closure of fisheries. So, I'd like to hear you comment on that aspect, please.
Je vais continue en
Thank you. That's an excellent question. I'll continue my answer in English.
I think it's a difficult balance for science to find, to consider all of the considerations in the fishery and the social impacts that might result from their advice. At the end of the day, I think they need to take those things into consideration. But when they're absolutely certain a stock is in dire shape and action needs to be taken, I think we do have to take action for greater certainty for the future. At the same time, when there are advice that is not aligned, for example, like mackerel, for the most part, the advice from science is not aligned with the views and feelings of many people in the fishing industry. I think in those cases there needs to be a redoubling of effort to bring greater certainty to the advice and to be sure that the decisions being taken are the right ones, and to take due consideration of the impacts on the livelihoods of the people who are going to be affected by that decision. So I hope that gives you an adequate answer to the question that we have to find the balance, but we do have to take the social economic views into consideration, particularly when we're not sure. Thank you.
Okay, Madame Debienne, I got the clock stopped because I see Mr. Cormier has his hand up, and I don't want you to lose time. Have you got a point of order or something, Mr. Cormier?
Oui, monsieur. Merci.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. But am I the only one who can't see Mr. Knight when he's speaking? I can't see him. Oh, well, now he's just appeared. Okay. Sorry, I couldn't hear Mr. Knight or see Mr. Knight on my screen. I don't know if my colleagues, Mr. Morrissey or Mr. Hanley, had the same problem, but now I can see him on my screen. Thank you.
Morrissey is shaking his head as well. So, okay, we'll continue on now with Madame Debienne's line of questioning.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll continue with the question for you, Mr. Knight. So how could you say a few words about this balance? For you, in your opinion, what needs to be done? What's the most important step to take to ensure that there is a better balance so that we can ensure that there is greater predictability? Now, we talked about herring and mackerel. We've seen the stocks decline. Why didn't DFO predict a few years ahead the situation into support to the fishers who would be affected by a closure of the fishery?
Again, it's a bit of a difficult question when it comes to herring and mackerel. Mackerel being an Atlantic-wide consideration, it's a stock that Canada shares with the United States. And the science advice that I'm aware of, and I may not be aware of the most recent advice given my departure from DFO 5 years ago, but the advice has been for a very long time that mackerel stocks are in very poor shape. For the most part, the fishing industry and the people who are on the water, the fish harvesters, don't believe this state of that advice. They are seeing, in many cases, an abundance of mackerel. For example, in the area where I live now by the coast this year, there was an abundance of mackerel of a good variety of sizes and for a good duration of the season. In answer to your question about the prediction of that's been a long-standing issue. But what's not been resolved is any bringing together of the views of the fish harvesters and science. In other words, it was an issue 7 to 10 years ago. It's still an issue today, that the view of science is one thing, the view of fish harvesters is another thing. Herring is a little more difficult to answer your question, and I'll stop there for the sake of time, but just to illustrate that when it comes to herring, there are many different stocks of herring that are more localized, so it is a little more difficult to answer the question. It depends on the area. Thank you.
Votre suggestion.
So your suggestion to the committee, what would that be in that context?
So my suggestion to the committee in the limited time, Chair, that's left is that there has to be more communication with the fish harvesters and there has to be more pragmatic advice. When there's greater uncertainty, there has to be a redoubling of efforts to find out the real truth and be more certain about what the real situation is. I know that's occurred to some extent in mackerel, but that needs to be the way forward. There needs to be bringing together and ground truthing. If the views of the fishermen and the scientists are aligned, that's great. We can be pretty sure. If there's a wide disparity and we're not sure, then there should be a lot more work put into bringing together those views. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Debienne. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses who are here today. My first question is for Mr. Knight. Mr. Knight, when I was listening to your testimony, I was reflecting on the violent attacks against the Mi'kmaq fishers that took place in 2000 around the lobster dispute, and was, we know after the incident, sorry, I'm getting distracted. We know that after the incident, DFO acknowledged the conservation knowledge that the Mi'kmaq fishers used, that if it had been acknowledged, that the violence probably would have not escalated to the extent that it did, and that a lack of understanding of Mi'kmaq conservation principles that later demonstrated that the lobster fishing done by Mi'kmaq fishers would have had little to no impact on the long-term conservation of the species. Now, I'm pulling from your point around the importance of consideration of the views of fish harvesters and Indigenous groups about the health of the stock. And I'm wondering what efforts have been made by the department to understand the social impacts that its communications have during real-time events that are impacting the safety and livelihood of fishers using this incident, this dispute in particular as an example. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I'm well aware of that very difficult time I didn't work in the area that incident occurred at the time, but I did work thereafter, and I am aware of the situation to a very good extent, and I know the people, the Mi'kmaq people that were involved. So what efforts have been taken? I think there have been a lot of efforts taken and a lot of progress made since that time to incorporate the views and knowledge of Indigenous people in the management of the fishery. And there's been great efforts and great successes in some parts of Atlantic Canada, and as well as in the North and Western Canada since that time. However, in the development of science advice, there's been attempts to include Indigenous knowledge, but there's not been, in my view, enough consideration given to Indigenous knowledge or the knowledge of fish harvesters. And I know that's difficult. It's very difficult to incorporate anecdotal information in a computer-based model, but I think that has to be taken into greater consideration as part of the outcome and the science advice.
Thank you. So any additional thoughts that you might have around how we can work towards having a clear communication of reports that are being collected, ensuring that everybody's accessing the information and understands them, so that we have, information so that everybody's working under the same, with the same context and information to move forward with?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I alluded to that in my opening remarks, that in some cases, in some regions, or in some sectors, there's better communication and better exchange of information. There's more examples of the scientists working with the fish harvesters and getting input from them and communicating back to them. And the end result of that is, I would hope, better science, better collection of information from fish harvesters, and no doubt better understanding of the science. Therefore, increased confidence in the science. But that needs to occur in all fisheries, in all sectors. I would say to you that if I picked one fishery, that probably is best illustrated in the crab fishery in eastern Canada, whether it be the Gulf region, Maritimes region, or the Newfoundland Labrador region. But in other fisheries, that's not as good, and that needs to improve.
Thank you. And thank you through the chair, and back to Mr. Knight again. Any additional ideas around any partnerships or tables that could be formed between DFO and management boards or fishing unions to better communicate this type of data?
Well, as I've said earlier, in response to that question, that there needs to be more broad-based inclusion of information from Indigenous people and fish harvesters. It's occurring in some cases, in a lot of cases it's not. So I think DFO science needs to look at the models where that is occurring and where it is working, and build on those models and spread that throughout other areas, other regions, and other fisheries.
Thank you. And I guess just to sort of the final follow-up piece to these questions is around any accountability mechanisms that you can think of that would help ensure that DFO and the Coast Guard are sharing accurate, relevant information when it comes to the data that impacts events as they occur.
Well, in that question, I think it's relevant to talk about accountability for delivery of the science programs in terms of getting the surveys done that are necessary to produce the science. And in my previous experience, one part of my career, I was responsible for the delivery of the Conservation Protection Program through the use of Coast Guard ships. And after some very difficult discussions, the level of accountability was really raised, and that improved. I think given the ongoing challenges in most DFO regions in getting the science programs delivered, I think there needs to be a much higher level of accountability, and those responsible should be held accountable to make sure that the surveys are done, that DFO science gets top priority, and when it doesn't get delivered, those who were responsible are held accountable.
Barron. We'll now go to Mr. Perkins for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to Mr. Nash and Mr. Knight for appearing. I'd just like to do a quick follow-up, if I could, Mr. Knight, to Ms. Barron's first question, which is that the lobster dispute in 2020 was around the area of St. Mary's Bay in southwest Nova Scotia, which is a critical breeding ground for all lobster in southwest Nova Scotia, but New England as well. And fishermen tell me, because they're a source of a great deal of information, that if you pull a trap out in the summer in St. Mary's Bay when the water's warm and lobster are breeding and very active, you can yield about 90 pounds or so of lobster a day when you're pulling it several times a day in the long daylight. But if you fish that in the regulated DFO season in the winter, when the water's colder, you get on average 3 to 6 pounds. So it's not necessarily about the number of traps in the water, it's about the yield of the trap and the time of the year with regard to the breeding and non-breeding. But I wonder if you could comment on that a little.
I'll try. I'm not precisely familiar with the metrics you're talking about in terms of the catch rates, but what I can tell you is that lobsters, for the most part, lobster to begin with is our biggest fishery in Canada. It's our most important fishery, volume or in terms of dollar-wise. When lobsters shed their shell, like all of our shellfish species do, they grow into a larger shell, and their next activity is to feed as much as they can to grow into that larger shell and get the muscle back into the shell. So when they do that, they're very vulnerable, they're very hungry. So when there's a lobster fishery during that time of year, in the summer season when a lot of the lobsters are either molting or soft shell, there may be very good catch rates, but there may be a very high mortality. For example, if those lobsters are hauled to the surface and they're in a soft-shelled state, in many cases they're going to be considered as no good, that there's no meat in the shell. You have a shell, it'll be practically empty. In many cases, that'll be discarded. And because when it gets discarded, it's very fragile. That lobster at that time, when it breaks the surface of the water, it's very fragile. If it's handled even if it's handled very gently and put back into the water, it may float away because there's nothing in that shell, only water. If the water drains out of it, it'll float away. But in many cases, it's discarded in a way that it's not going to get back to the bottom, or it's injured because it's so fragile. So what I would say, even though the catch rates may be very high, that's not necessarily a good fishing practice. And I would think that we need to focus on getting the best quality and the best yield with the least mortality for the greater protection of the resource.
Thank you. If I can go back to one of the things in your remarks about science, and I think you talked a bit about the ability of DFO to actually conduct the science in some cases. Sometimes it's budgets and sometimes it's not. The ocean side of the department has seen a 63% increase in its budget in 5 years, but the fishery side hasn't. So my question is about ships. A lot of times DFO doesn't have access to the ships to do the science. The Greenland ship that they use for some species is usually available only after the peak of the season when you would do the research, if it's available at all. The ships that we use they use to go out to see mackerel are sometimes only available earlier before the season's available, or the spawning mass available. So what are the options? We've heard some options here from some of the groups about using the industry ships. Did you encounter that at all in your time? And could we supplement our inability to find the ships with working with industry more closely to do that?
Thank you for that question. It's a very good but a very complex question. Mr. Chair, before I go on, I may have misunderstood the question from MP Barron in terms of the timeline. I don't think it changes my answer very much, other than the fact that if you were talking about the incident that occurred in the early 2000s, the context is not a lot different than the incident that MP Perkins referred to. So if you were talking about the earlier one, I think I've answered it correctly. If not, the context still applies. In terms of the use of ships, if any of the DFO science people were here, I would think they would tell you that it's absolutely imperative that the survey be conducted by the same type of ship with the same type of trawl, and for the most part at the same time of year, if they're to get results that are valid for their science surveys. Having said that, a trawl survey is only one piece of information that can be used. Secondly, given the problems of the past decade, it's not just last year, it's the past decade and more, but certainly in the past decade, with the unpredictability of getting the survey done, then we should be looking to other models. One that I'll offer is the snow crab survey in the Gulf of St. Lawrence that's done with the participation of fish harvesters. It's done with an industry vessel, and to the best of my knowledge, even though I'm not totally current on that, given my departure from DFO, that survey gets delivered. Otherwise, the contractor doesn't get paid for the work. So I think, given the unpredictability, DFO science and industry need to work together to look at better models for delivery.
Mr. Perkins, we'll now go to Mr. Morrissey for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. Listen, my question is to Mr. Knight, and I assume you're hearing me adequately? Okay. Mr. Knight, listening to your testimony, certainly if I was a fisher, I would be alarmed and concerned and use a lot of negative models or terminology on what is their livelihood, because the management of resources stock is an absolute importance to the fishing industry of Atlantic Canada, the East Coast. We live on it. So getting the science, getting assessments are so critical. How would you compare? Because every time there is, it's interesting, and I want you to comment on this, every time there is a reduction in quota by DFO, scientists recommend a reduction, there is this groundswell, a lot of times, of opposition from the industry itself. Anytime there's an increase, there's not a peep. Could you comment on the disparity and actually draw it into connection? A lot of what I'm hearing today is the same commentary that was made in the lead up to the 1993 or 1992 closure and total collapse of the Newfoundland cod fishery, where fishers were saying scientists were getting it wrong. And we've seen that in a number of pelagic species here on the East Coast. Could you comment briefly?
Thank you for the excellent question, because that is a phenomenon that often occurs, that when there's a decrease, no one wants to hear it. When there's an increase, everyone wants to hear it and take advantage of it. But
so my question is this: so how come science is always right when they recommend an increase in quota, but they're always wrong when they recommend a decrease?
I don't think that's the case from my experience. I think it is a phenomenon that occurs from time to time. But I'll go back to your point about the advice in the time leading up to the closure of the cod moratorium in Newfoundland and Labrador. I worked there at the time, and I can tell you without any hesitation that the fish harvesters, particularly the inshore sector, were telling DFO, telling me, telling DFO Science for 3 or 4 years in advance that the stocks are gone. The stocks are decimated. We need to cut the quota. We need to reduce the fishery, and we need to reduce the offshore fishing on the spawning banks. That was the message I was hearing at that time. It did take a couple of years for that to become evident, and in the early part of the 1990s, 1991 and 1992, that became crystal clear that action had to be taken. But we heard that message loud and clear from the inshore fleet long before it was evident to the offshore or to science.
Okay, my next question would be then, what is currently, there was a reduction in the Atlantic Canadian mackerel fishery. Well, actually, it was shut for the year, and the spring herring fishery. So from and you've been gone now, you told me 5 years, so you didn't have access to information. But what may have been missing, if there was something missing in that decision between the fisher and the department bureaucracy responsible for advising the minister?
As you've restated, my information may not be current on mackerel stocks, but my understanding of the mackerel science...
I'm more on your experience on how there would be, there may be a disconnect between the scientific arm and the industry on that resource.
So the disconnect is the gap between what the fish harvesters see in terms of mackerel abundance. They see good abundance, they see good catch rates, they see good-sized mackerel, and the science has been saying for a very long time that there's no indication that there's a spawning biomass that can support that kind of fishery. And that includes the lack of spawning and lack of recruitment, as my understanding. And I again reiterate that my information may be a little dated. But what I would say, if the science advice had been right when we first started to hear about this 10 years ago or more, and with the mackerels being taken since by the Americans and by the Canadian fishermen, there would be none left. And that's not the case. In this year, there's a significant abundance of mackerel. Of course, as you've indicated, there's not much of a commercial catch, but there's a significant abundance of mackerel available and visible around the shorelines.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. Your time has gone just a little bit over. We'll now go to Madame Beyroube for 2.5 minutes or less, please. Madame Beyroube.
Oh, it's my turn.
Please.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, ma question...
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is this. In your opinion, how is the policy affecting these decisions?
Would you be able to clarify your question a little bit in terms of which policy you're talking about is affecting the decisions?
For DFO, the departmental policy.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if I'm in a current position of really to answer that question, but I'll offer an attempt to answer the question for the member. I think part of the departmental policy that affects the guidance of how science offers its advice is a precautionary approach. And part of that precautionary approach policy is that in the absence of clear scientific advice, we should err on the side of caution and make the reductions to ensure the stocks are protected. And that's a good policy. But as I said earlier, when we do have that uncertainty and when it's affecting livelihoods or when the potential cuts affect the livelihoods of harvesters, then I think we need to really redouble our efforts to get greater certainty about what the real advice is and what the real situation is. I hope that answers your question.
Well, we know that the SAS process deals with interpretations that vary when it comes to scientific advice. Now, earlier you talked, or you said, in fact, that for fishers there were quotas that were cut, but we know that fishers are facing insecurity. So where are the shortcomings with respect to the department, with respect to the scientific advice, the human side of things? Where are these shortcomings coming from?
Thank you. That's a good question as well, because it's the human side of things. From a DFO science perspective, they, like all organizations, I'm sure, are struggling to find the right people to put in all these positions. So that's a bit of a challenge, which they'll need to work harder in the future, to, like every other sector of industry across Canada, to find the right people to go into positions. But that equally applies for the human side when it comes to the fish harvesters, because there is a human consequence when there are reductions in the fishery. There are livelihoods that are impacted, there are families that are impacted, and there are businesses that can't pay their bills. So I hope I've answered your question on one side of the equation or the other, but in both cases, there's a human side to it.
Go to Ms. Barron for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question again is for Mr. Knight. And Mr. Knight, I appreciate you bringing up the decisions that were or weren't made prior to the cod moratorium in Newfoundland and shed a little bit of light on that. I was, as I had mentioned earlier, although to you personally, I'm from Newfoundland, and my family decided to move in response to the cod moratorium in the early 90s and moved from one coast to the next. Clearly, the cod moratorium had impacts on many, not just the fishers on the water, but communities surrounding there as well, as you also mentioned. I'm wondering, I do see some themes of similar decision-making processes happening today than what we saw back then, and it concerns me. And I'm wondering if you can speak to the cod moratorium specifically and what we've learned from it and what we should be doing differently now that that has happened to ensure that we don't have a repeat of these circumstances.
I think that's a very difficult question given the enormity of the consequences of getting science advice wrong and the enormity of the impact of the closure of the northern cod fishery and the other groundfish fisheries that occurred across Atlantic Canada in the early 1990s. I think there's been a lot learned since that time. I think there are a lot of better processes. There's the implementation of the precautionary approach, and there is a lot better engagement now, albeit more room required for improvement, but there's a lot better engagement with fish harvesters. There's many examples, I think, albeit Mr. Nash mentioned that the halibut fishery is not so good in his area this year. The halibut fishery, for example, in the Gulf of St. Lawrence and the south coast of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland has been very well managed. There's very good industry participation with science, and industry have taken ownership of that resource and helping science. So I think that's one example where there's been a major improvement of how science is done and how it benefits the participants in the fishery.
Thank you. Do I have time for another question?
You're right on the mark for your 2.5 minutes.
Thank you.
And of course, if you look at the clock, that expires our first hour of testimony. I want to say a special thank you to Mr. Nash and Mr. Knight for giving us the value of their experience here today. And we'll suspend for a couple of minutes just to set up with the officials for the last hour. So again, thank you, Mr. Knight. Thank you, Mr. Nash. For continuation of science at DFO study. We are now joined, of course, in person and virtually by 5 officials from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Of course, back again, we have Mr. Adam Burns, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister of Fisheries and Harbour Management. We have Mr. No, I was going to say Mr. Davis, but he's not online yet. We have here in person Aaron McPherson, Assistant Deputy Minister, Ecosystems and Ocean Sciences. Online, virtually, we have Sarah Murdoch, Senior Director, Pacific Salmon Strategy Transformation. And we have Rebecca Reed, Regional Director General, Pacific Region, and Doug Wenzel, Regional Director General, Maritimes Region. We will now proceed with opening remarks from the department. I believe Ms. McPherson, you're doing the opening 5 minutes. When you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. It's my pleasure to be joining you today here in Ottawa on the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people to discuss science conducted by Fisheries and Oceans Canada. Just like we heard, my name is Aaron McPherson. Je m'appelle Aaron McPherson et je suis la sous-ministre adjointe responsable.
I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister responsible for DFO's Ecosystems and Oceans Science sector. I'm joined today by Adam Burns, Acting ADM responsible for DFO's National Fisheries and Harbour Management Program, and Rebecca Reed, Regional Director General responsible for regional operations, including the science program in DFO's Pacific region. She's joined by Neil Davis, Regional Director in DFO's Pacific region, responsible for the Fisheries Management Program, and Sarah Murdoch, Senior Director, responsible for leading the implementation of the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative. I'm also joined by Doug Wenzel, Regional Director General, responsible for regional operations, including science in DFO's Maritimes region. Our thoughts are with all of those affected by Hurricane Fiona in Atlantic Canada and eastern Quebec.
Is made up of scientists, biologists, technicians, engineers, and many others that work in labs, in the field, and in offices across the country. Our researchers are widely recognized, both nationally and internationally, for their expertise and leadership in oceans and fishery science. DFO Science Sector also encourages researchers to lead and to actively participate in domestic and international science organizations, committees, and forums in order to share their Canadian expertise and gain knowledge on other international best practices that could be applied within their own research programs and in the advice that DFO Science Sector generates for decision makers. In 2021, DFO researchers published more than 625 papers in external scientific journals, and over the past 5 years, their works have been cited in over 22,000 other scientific articles worldwide. Our research program includes fishery science, aquaculture science, ecosystem and biodiversity science, climate change and ocean science, as well as hydrography and biotechnology science. The success of these research programs could not be accomplished without our important collaborations with domestic and international partners, including other government departments, industry, academia, non-government organizations, Indigenous partners and communities, and other governments. The work of DFO Science Sector includes the collection of long-term scientific data sets, research, as well as the provision of timely and objective peer-reviewed science advice that meets the Government of Canada's changing needs and priorities. The focus of DFO's science research programs is directly influenced by the department's mandate, Government of Canada priorities, and the DFO management decision-making needs. Research takes time to complete, and so it's necessary to understand the priorities of our management counterparts in the department to be able to anticipate the types of research that's needed to address future questions they may ask. Science plays a key role in the department's decision-making process and is considered by decision-makers alongside socioeconomic considerations, relevant policies, stakeholder consultations, as well as the contributions from Indigenous communities, which are gathered by other sectors within the department. The peer-reviewed science advice that's provided for decision-making is not the perspective of a single researcher, nor is it based on a single paper. It is generated through the Canadian Science Advisory Secretariat, where scientists debate and consider the weight of evidence to arrive at a consensus-based conclusion. This process encourages healthy debate, includes expertise from both inside and outside of government, generates full and open discussions, and ensures the integrity of the science advice by ensuring that multiple points of view are considered. Over the past several years, DFO Science has strengthened this process to underscore the value in providing impartial advice to inform decision-making, and we continue to look for opportunities to innovate and be more efficient in order to provide the best, most timely, and robust advice possible. I'm incredibly proud of the work of our scientists. The work they do every day helps us better understand the state of our oceans, how they're changing, and the impact this may have on our fisheries and their ecosystems. So I'd like to thank you for the invitation to appear today, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. Half a minute under time, so this half a minute we'll save for questions. We'll now go to Mr. Arnold for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming in today as we wrap up this study. It's been interesting to hear from DFO officials initially describing the science program within DFO as being science-based department and science integrity being a key piece of that, and then expert witness testimony throughout the study has drawn that into question. I'll start with Mr. Burns, if I could. Mr. Burns, Dr. Mona Niemer, the Chief Science Advisor for Canada, told the committee that DFO has introduced a conflict of interest requirement for participants in the CSAS process. When was the requirement introduced?
I'll actually pass that to my colleague Aaron McPherson, who's the ADM responsible for that.
So the conflict of interest policy, as well as a participation policy, codified what was already best practice in many of our CSAS processes across the country, and codified that participants who come to our meetings are in fact there as impartial experts, bringing their expertise and not consideration of the impacts of their decisions.
So when was that policy implemented?
They were published in 2021 on our website.
2021. And who is responsible for vetting the CSAS participants' declarations?
So it's the chair of the individual CSAS processes who is then responsible for ensuring that the conflict of interest policies are respected throughout the process.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Niemer also mentioned that science integrity policy introduced to DFO within the past few years. Who within DFO is responsible for ensuring the science integrity policy is being implemented and exercised as intended?
Sorry, would you mind repeating the question, Mr. Chair?
Who is responsible for ensuring the science integrity policy is being implemented and exercised?
Certainly. So the Deputy Minister is responsible for the overall application of DFO's science integrity policy, and our ombudsperson is the person who's responsible for dealing with any allegations of breaches of the policy.
We've heard through the process of this study that the CSAS process is sometimes sidelined or sidetracked. Decisions are made, but the actual science information that was considered in the process is not made public, sometimes in the case of years afterwards. Can you think of any circumstances in which DFO should refuse to share with Canadians scientific documents, reports, or assessments, such as the BC Steelhead recovery potential assessment, why that shouldn't be shared with the public?
So the recovery potential assessment for Steelhead is actually published. It was published subsequent to the actual meeting.
The science documents in that CSAS process have not been made public.
So working papers, Mr. Chair, that are developed are for discussion at a CSAS meeting form the basis for the science advice. They're discussed, deliberated, and the conclusions are then codified in the science advisory report that becomes on our website, and that was published.
But it seems that the whole process is then overseen by DFO. There's certainly been questions drawn around the integrity of that process because those papers and that evidence is not made public, and in some cases years afterwards, for it to be scrutinized or criticized outside of what happened within the confidential process of the CSAS process. Why would those papers not be made public?
So again, Mr. Chair, I'll repeat that the outcome of the peer review process, and which is the advice to inform decision-making, is a science advisory report or a science response that appears on our website after the conclusion of the meeting, and that is the formal advice to inform decision makers. There are many steps in the process to formulate that advice. It needs to be as robust as possible, and it needs to comply with the outcome of the peer review process itself. Those appear on our website.
Thank you. One very short question now, if I have time. For Ms. Reid, I guess, is there any independent oversight or reviews, such as an independent third-party audit, that would examine whether DFO is actually abiding by its established policies and frameworks?
Are you talking about the science integrity policy for clarification?
Well, DFO is responsible for ensuring policies and frameworks are properly deployed and adhered to, but is there any independent oversight that would look at whether DFO is actually abiding by those policies?
Well, if you're referring to the science review process, the process itself is public. There are external participants. And so I'm just not sure I'm quite understanding your question. I apologize.
Okay, I'll go on to another question then to Ms. Murdoch. Is it appropriate for DFO to provide transparency and scientific reasons when closures such as the Pacific Strategic Salmon Initiative closures were announced?
Definitely. We, both leading up to key decisions such as that, as well as following those decisions, there's extensive engagement done with key stakeholders and key individuals impacted, as well as information provided out regarding the decision. With regard to the closures in particular, my colleague on the line, Mr. Neil Davis's team, actually did extensive engagement, particularly with the commercial and Indigenous fisheries sectors before those announcements and decisions were made.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Your time has gone a little bit over. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The interest that we've had in DFO science on the West Coast was really driven by the Discovery Islands process, and the advice that was given to the minister that aquaculture in that area posed only a minimal risk. There were questions about the methodology, but there's also questions about material that wasn't included simply because there was no consensus among the players about the conclusions that the DFO scientists actually reached. So there's a perception that this consensus model, if you can call it that, is contaminating the decision, the information that informs decisions. As well, there's also a perception that information in those reports is being somehow massaged by the DFO before it gets to the minister. Can you comment on that?
So I'll offer a few comments on that. First, I'll just maybe clarify that our policy on consensus appears on our departmental website, and it describes that we define consensus as absence of evidence-based opposition. So it's not enough to disagree. There needs to be evidence that's brought forward to support the point of view that's being made at the meeting itself. However, to your point about opposing views, there's also, at the discretion of the chair, the ability in our policies to make note of perspectives or issues that did not arrive at consensus. So that isn't at odds with the policies that we currently have. And I agree that that's something that we could make use of more often. To the point that you made around massaging information, I'd like to challenge that interpretation and say that it's very important that we look at peer-reviewed information as it becomes available. In places where a field of study is new and emerging, it's more likely that we'll have areas of healthy debate, different point of view, and that makes it very important that we go back and revisit that information and monitor new papers that are being published. It makes it very important that we have a very diverse perspective of experts around the table. And as things change, as new papers are published and are subjected to peer review, we'll revisit the advice that we've given to inform decision making.
Thank you for that. Ms. Reid, now knowing what you know, if you had a chance to redo the work that went into information for the minister on the Discovery Islands issue and with aquaculture, would things have been done differently now?
So our job was to provide advice to the minister and from a science perspective to give her the information that was generated through the risk assessments that were completed. And I'm fully satisfied that we did that properly. The minister took that information and made decisions, and I think that was a very appropriate process.
There would be many who would say that it wasn't good. It did not pass the sniff test of a lot of people out of the coast. And perception is reality to a lot of people. And of course, when that happens, it does damage the credibility of your organization. And that is something that you're still working through, I'm afraid. The whole issue of climate change, of course, it raises up, situations like we've seen with Hurricane Fiona. But in terms of the work that the DFO is doing, the science work, the ocean science work that it's doing, are you trying to keep up with or even stay ahead of analysis of climate change and how it is changing the characteristics of the ocean and of the fish species? Mr. Burns, perhaps you could comment on that, or Ms. McPherson?
Maybe if that's all right, I'll start. Very much so, climate change is affecting our oceans and our aquatic ecosystems across Canada. And that really speaks to the importance of our ocean monitoring, because that's really the starting place for our climate change projections, our models, the types of information that we use to project what species vulnerabilities may exist in different parts of Canada's ocean. We have an incredibly long time series of ocean data. We work with countries around the world as well as autonomous instrumentation to ensure that we're able to collect information that then can be used to drive modeling approaches to predict how sea level might rise, how that would affect small craft harbors and coastal infrastructure, how that might affect species vulnerabilities. And we actually bring some of this information together in our annual State of the Ocean report that we make public every year, and we change from ocean to ocean every year to highlight some of the key risks associated with climate change and other ocean changes and how it might affect Canadians. Adam, did you have
Thank you for that. Do I have time?
About 15 seconds, so I don't think you'll get a question in.
Well,
or
I'll
answer.
just make the comment that there's also a perception out there that the effort and resources put into ocean studies is not balanced well with the fisheries side of things, that the fisheries side of things is left wanting. Perhaps you can work in a response to that later on. Thank you.
Mr. Hardy, we'll now go to Madame Berube for 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Ms. McPherson. There are some recommendations with respect to sufficient resources for assessments for the stocks on a timely basis. Does that mean governmental resources, or does that mean calling upon private resources or involving fishers in collecting data? And how would this unfold in more concrete terms?
Thank you for the question. I would say that the types of analyses and questions our stock assessment biologists and researchers are being asked are becoming more and more complex, and my previous answer spoke to some of the climate change impacts and ecosystem considerations that we're working into the analyses that we undertake. The question really at its core is, what is the information that we need to inform decision making? How can we best generate that information? And I think a key consideration of that is, what can partners do? How can we leverage relationships with Indigenous communities, with non-governmental groups, with industry, to collect data, to interpret results with us? And sometimes funding isn't the answer. Sometimes it's actually time that we need to generate a data series, a time series, to finish research projects. So I think that there isn't a single answer that I could offer other than to say these are the types of questions that we would need to pursue.
Suite à ce que vous venez de mentionner,
Well, in your opinion, then it might be desirable for there to be an ongoing contribution from external experts outside of the department then?
We actually make use of external experts already. In all of our science advisory processes that we undertook last year to generate science advice and a science advisory report, we had external experts there. It's incredibly important we have them at the table, and we could make use of that more. We've got a number of very healthy and very positive collaborations internationally and domestically with fisheries organizations, international fisheries organizations, and it's something that we think is incredibly important to ensure that we're able to learn from them and they're able to learn from us.
et à votre avis aussi, pensez-vous
Do you think that the department has the needs or the resources it needs in terms of human resources, material resources, in order to do the work that you have to do?
Certainly, it is important to set priorities and to understand how the work we do in science can be used to inform fisheries decision-making in other parts of our mandate, marine conservation, for example. We have almost maybe 2,200 staff across the country who are working in different parts of the science work that we do. Fishery science is our largest science program within DFO. But as I said, there are a number of questions that we would need to ask and really think about in order to be able to answer your question.
quand il s'agit du financement?
With respect to funding, then, do you need additional funding in order to support your activities?
Again, I'll just come back to our work is very much driven by what management needs in order to inform decision making. And as those needs change, as that mandate changes, as the time frame within which they'd like an answer change, that all drives the resources needed. But as I said, also, sometimes money isn't the issue. Sometimes it's time. It's time to conclude the research that we already have underway.
Est-ce que vous avez aussi
Do you also have labor shortages at DFO, staff shortages?
Pardonnez-moi, je n'ai pas entendu.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question. In the department, DFO, do you face a labor shortage? Are there staffing shortages in the department?
So what I would say is certainly in the science sector, we've seen a transition of our workforce. We're now younger. We have more women than we've ever had before in the workforce. And we are looking to hire from universities to leverage the academic partnerships we have with Canadian institutions, international institutions, to make sure we have the best possible biologists, technicians, engineers at our disposal to provide advice. It's challenging to do so. We're very fortunate that we have been able to find a lot of people who are very talented who want to work at DFO Science.
Thank you, Madame Berube. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. So many questions, trying to identify the main ones here. I'm happy that we've had an opportunity to loop back and to follow up on some of the items that have come up over the length of this study. A side note, I do want to commend the many scientists who are working very hard within DFO, and I'm very happy to hear that we're seeing increased women who are being hired and taking their place within the organization. I'm wondering if you could share, is there a wild salmon management division within DFO or any division that focuses specifically on wild salmon?
Rebecca, am I able to turn that over to you?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. So the way we're organized in the Pacific region is we have a regional director of fisheries management, Neil Davis, and he has responsibilities for salmon management. We also have a Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative, which is direct reporting to the deputy minister, but sitting in Pacific region. Wes Shoemaker is the lead for that, and Sarah Murdoch is representing that organization, that part of the organization today.
Thank you. What else is within the role of the fisheries management role that is composed with the salmon fisheries? You said is under that role. What else is that manager responsible for?
So the regional director is responsible for the management of all fisheries in Pacific region. He also is also responsibility for aquaculture as well. And Small Craft Harbors is under that organization in addition.
Thank you. Has any concerns been brought to you, or have you been seeing any potential conflicts between the same manager being in charge of aquaculture and wild salmon?
I mean, I certainly have heard criticism by members of the public, questions about that. But my view is that we understand our role and responsibility for management of wild salmon and management of aquaculture, and we do it appropriately.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion around doing a separation of the roles to ensure that wild salmon are getting the advocacy and the voices and the attention that it deserves with our dwindling population of this vital species?
So one of the, I think, key changes that has taken place over the past couple of years was the creation of the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative. And so you have a separate group within the organization leading the changes needed for salmon protection overall. And so that program, which has $647 million over 5 years, is leading some very fundamental changes in a number of different ways to support wild Pacific salmon.
And can you remind me how much of that $647 million has been used to date on the Pacific Salmon Initiative?
I don't have those numbers available. Sarah may be able to respond briefly, but it may be something we need to get back to you on. But if you don't mind me turning to Sarah, she might be able to respond.
I think we've actually provided the information previously to the committee, but I apologize, I don't have that readily available. Last year was our first sort of ramp up year. We received full approvals partway through the year, and we're into our year 2, but we can certainly get back to the committee with that information.
Thank you. I do recall it coming forward before, and my recollection was that there is still a lot of funds remaining that have not been utilized within this initiative, and questioned the structure that's currently in place to ensure that wild salmon are prioritized. We know there's a link between OpenNet Penn fish farms and the pollution from those farms causing impacts on wild salmon. And so to have one manager that is considering both of those conflicting variables is very problematic. And I'm hearing from many constituents that they would like to see that addressed. So I just wanted to highlight the concerns that are being brought to me around that. I wanted to bring it back a little bit as we've gone through many witnesses since we first began this study. And I'm wondering how participants in the CSAS process, and to clarify for anybody who may not know, it's the Canadian Science Advisory Secretariat, how participants are selected.
I'd be happy to take that question. So the selection of participants at CSAS meetings is driven by a steering committee that is formed after we have launched the process to formulate advice. So the steering committee is made up of the chair, generally the part of the management side of the organization that has asked for the advice, as well as relevant experts, including generally those who are going to be drafting the papers to be discussed. They go through the list of expertise that we need to bring to bear on the issue in question, and then work through how to, invite participants that round out the full expertise. I will note, though, Mr. Chair, that one of the innovations that I mentioned earlier in my remarks around the CSAS process is will be in the future developing a registry for experts where individuals will be able to self-identify as an expert and bring forward their interest in participating in the CSAS process to ensure that we aren't missing expertise both nationally and internationally that might be of use.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. We'll now go to Mr. Zimmer for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are exclusively for Rebecca Reed around Chinook closure. So we heard after previous testimony from you and the minister that despite what you say, you won't listen to anglers and you won't listen to the science. Why not?
So we have an advisory process set up for salmon management, with commercial, recreational, and First Nation harvesters and advisors. It is a very comprehensive process. And it
excuse me,
forms
Ms. Reed. They
yes.
gave you some advice and you completely disregarded it this spring. I'll move on to my second question. Two UBC studies recently indicated that there is an abundance of Chinook while our southern resident killer whales are present in Canadian waters. It seems that you are bent, though, on closing things down despite what the science says. What takes precedent to you, the science or the closure ideology of 30 by 30?
So with regards to the decision around Chinook closures, we do have a responsibility to support the southern resident killer whales as a species at risk that are endangered. And
two UBC studies recently said that there's an abundance of Chinook at the times that they're in our Canadian waters, though.
The Chinook salmon represents about 90% of the diet of those whales, and we have, I think, a responsibility to ensure that we provide enough fish at the right times and locations.
Two UBC studies, and I'll say it again, recently indicated that there's an abundance of Chinook when they're in our Canadian waters, yet you closed it anyway. And I think what we're trying to understand, we've heard with the testimonies around science, is that when science is saying there's fish present sufficient and an abundance of fish for southern resident killer whales and you close it anyway, we wonder why. And that's what I've asked you. So I'm just curious.
And
what sets the precedent? The science, because the science clearly said there's enough fish, or the ideology of closure of 30 by 30?
So I think that the question about science is the important point, that when we look at science, it is a series of pieces of information. So you've got information from universities, we've got our own stock assessment scientists, we have a process to consider sort of the abundance of Chinook, and it is not a single paper or a single study that determines that.
I'll get on to my third question because, Ms. Reed, when UBC, which has a great reputation around the world for its science and its capabilities, is saying that there's an abundance of fish, yet you close it anyway. I think that's why we ask you these questions. The example that I would bring up is Pender Bluffs. We were in Sydney, BC, just out of Sydney, BC. A great example of closing unnecessarily. We were there present in the area. We, of course, didn't go in because it was closed. But we've learned from Washington State data that southern resident killer whales are only in the area 7 to 10 days on average per year. That's for the entire year. Yet the closure is permanent and it's all year long. I guess I would ask you, with all the 5,000 added staff, full-time equivalent staff to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans over the last 6 years, why can you not manage a moving bubble zone like on the East Coast, where you simply manage and close the area where the whales are present, and when they're present, it's closed, and we'd all agree that that's a thing to do. But when the whales are not present, that it's open. So why would you not implement a moving bubble zone in an area like Pender Bluffs with all the added staff that have been added to DFO over the last number of years?
So we do have a comprehensive approach for managing the southern resident killer whales. But just to speak specifically to your question about Pender Bluffs, we have confirmed that area as one of the most frequently used areas, and for that reason, we believe
Washington State data has said Washington State data has said the killer whales are only there from 7 to 10 days per year.
And I would add that the bubble zones are employed as a management tool in other areas. And so when it comes
Why
down
wouldn't
to
you use it there if you know that the killer whales are there only 7 to 10 days a year? And it's such an important fishing area for the community. Why wouldn't you have it open when the whales aren't there?
So the reason for the closure is because of the importance of the area, the complexities of
You're
managing.
not answering my question.
I think I am answering it, actually. It's because of the importance of the area for that species
You're
at
going to
risk.
close it unnecessarily.
Mr. Zimmer, your time is up, but we are going to move on now to Mr. Morrissey for 5 minutes or less.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are to Dr. McPherson. Dr. McPherson, during this study, there has been from time to time witnesses appear that have questioned the assessment modeling format that's used by DFO. How often, because the information that goes in that helps in making the decisions is only as good as the modeling data or the modeling profile that you're using. How often is the modeling profile reviewed by DFO?
Thank you for the question. So there isn't a rule or a national standard that's applied, but we generally try to undertake a framework assessment, and that's where we go back and we look at the modeling approaches every 5 years. As I said, that's inconsistent because in some cases we don't use models, Mr. Chair, to inform our stock assessment. In some cases we use indices. And so I would just say that, as I said, that's a general.
Okay. Was modeling used in the decision to suspend the East Coast mackerel fishery this spring?
So in that particular fishery, we do have a model that is used to provide advice to inform fisheries decision making, and it provides projections as well that allows us to evaluate what the future prospects.
Was it used?
Yes, it was.
And then there's been issues raised about the DFO's ability to do survey studies. I've been told that 1 out of 6 have not been done in a timely manner. Could you confirm to the committee that the DFO stock capacity studies are being done on a regular basis that will support the veracity of the data going into the modeling that ultimately is used to make decisions?
So what I can say, Mr. Chair, in response to that question is that we're very fortunate to have 2 new fisheries Coast Guard vessels on the East Coast and one on the West Coast.
Just a moment, Dr. McPherson.
Please.
My question was, can you confirm if all studies are being done on the East Coast on a timely manner, stock capacity surveys?
So what I was attempting to answer, Mr. Chair, is that we are right now undertaking work to comparatively trawl on the East Coast, which means we are using both the old and new vessels side by side to be able to ensure the continuity of the data series. We're still doing that. In fact, that's taking place in Newfoundland as we speak.
Dr. McPherson, I've been told by a different witness appeared before here and in meetings that DFO's stock assessments are not keeping pace with what the department has mandated. In fact, a lot have been missed over the past years. Correct or not correct?
Mr. Chair, I'll just maybe add the precision that I interpret the question to mean surveys as opposed to stock assessments, but
yes,
maybe
sorry.
Stock
assessment surveys.
Yeah, okay, perfect. And so I would say that we have had difficulties and challenges since the beginning of the pandemic as we transitioned to new vessels. However, we are fully committed to undertaking those surveys with the support of our Coast Guard colleagues as frequently as we possibly can to ensure the continuity of our time series.
Okay. A question, Doctor, could you provide to the committee a staff profile without giving individual names, but the staff profile of the science division, the division that you head in DFO, its capacity over the past 10 years? I would like if you could produce that in numbers, the various positions that are within this key part of DFO. And I'd like to see a profile for the past 10 years.
So I certainly can't speak to that going back 10 years to here today, but that is information that we would be able to share with the committee if requested.
Okay. Chair, how was my time?
You got 30 seconds left.
Okay. And then I go back. We had a retired DFO manager that appeared earlier in committee. I'm not sure if you heard or not, but he may have said that many decisions on stock are made without the data to support those decisions. Would you care to comment?
Colleague actually would like to comment.
Thanks for the question. And what I would say is that all of the decisions that are taken are informed by the best available science. Managing a large operation is about making trade-off decisions and priorities. So it isn't always science that is fresh off the press. In some instances, it's science that has been done prior to to that year. But we always base our decisions on the best available science, as well as the views of Indigenous communities, stakeholders, others with an interest in the fishery. And all of that is what's used to inform the management decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. We'll now go to Madame Berube for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Ms. Murdoch. Now, you know that last year, Dominique Robert, who is a research chair in Canada in ecology from the University of Quebec and at Rimouski, stated that DFO wasn't in a position to do a population test for certain fish stocks. So my question is DFO or does DFO have enough scientific vessels to do the fish stock surveys?
I think that respectfully, that question is probably better directed to either Dr. McPherson or, if you're regarding West Coast fisheries, to Rebecca Reed.
Parfait. Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, perhaps I'll start. And Rebecca, if you would like to add or complement anything I've said, please go ahead. We have 3 dedicated fisheries vessels with the Canadian Coast Guard that have just recently transitioned into service. And as I mentioned a few moments ago, we're very excited about that opportunity to have those new vessels. But in addition to those, we use platforms provided by industry in all parts of Canada to leverage the partnerships that exist with a number of industry groups to collect data. So when you think about the science that is being generated to inform decision-making at DFO, it is not solely science that's collected on Coast Guard platforms. It's science that's also collected using partnerships with industry and others. Rebecca, I'm not sure if you had anything to add.
I would just add that in the case where we have had trouble with vessel availability, we have also set up standing offers and contracts for the use of other vessels when needed, so that we can maintain our important stock assessment surveys. Thank you.
How do scientific capabilities impact the consultation process, the scientific consultation process?
So maybe I'll just start, and then Adam, if you wanted to add something about consultation. Maybe I'll just start by clarifying that in DFO's science sector, we undertake evidence-based peer review. We don't, and we aren't responsible for consultations with any of our partners, clients, or Indigenous communities on actual management decision-making. That responsibility rests with the management components and parts of our organization. So we undertake discussions to come to scientific conclusions, whereas they lead consultations with external parties.
Donc, j'ai pas beaucoup d'autres choses à ajouter. On pourrait...
Well, to add, I could say before the minister takes decisions, we organize consultations with stakeholders, with commercial fishers, Indigenous groups, environmental groups, the provinces, to inform us of the other considerations and the way that these stakeholders interpret the scientific notices so that the minister can make an informed decision based on all of these things. So
Madame Bouvet, your 2.5 minutes are gone a little bit over. You can't get much in 2.5 minutes. So Ms. Barron now will do her best to get everything in 2.5 minutes, I'm sure.
My turn. Thank you, Chair. I believe it was you, Dr. McPherson, I apologize, I don't believe I referred to you as doctor before, who was talking about the importance of having impartial experts and the conflict of interest policy through the CSAS process. And I'm wondering what the role of industry is as participants in this process.
So we also, in complement to the conflict of interest policy, we also have a participation policy associated with the CSAS process, Mr. Chair, which appears on our website and articulates the types of participants we're looking to assemble in order to undertake that evidence-based peer review I spoke of. Certainly, it's recognized that industry, and I'll just say, for example, a member of the commercial fishing industry who is on the water collecting data with us would have expertise that would be relevant to the types of work that we do in our CSAS review, and the policy definitely accommodates for that type of expertise. We also solicit and want to include Indigenous knowledge holders to contribute information to inform our conclusions in the way that is amenable to them. We have a policy that outlines the types of expertise we're looking for and how we define an expert. It appears on our website.
Thank you, Dr. McPherson. I'm wondering if you can expand a little bit on how somebody who's there representing an industry who is wanting to ensure that their business is producing a profit, how would their input be considered through this process of ensuring that experts are impartial for example, in making decisions around what research would be available and how that research would then ensure that we're making the right decisions to protect our oceans and have sustainable fisheries moving forward?
So thank you for the question. And what I would say is, as part of the CSAS process and the conflict of interest policy, it's very clear that the focus of the discussion is not on the subsequent management decision that is made and as results of the advice we give. It is very much on what is the evidence base we can bring forward in this discussion to evaluate where is the data, where is the published papers, where is the peer-reviewed advice from other jurisdictions that we can bring to bear on the issue at hand. As I mentioned, the chair ultimately is responsible for ensuring that that impartiality, that spirit of consensus based on evidence is respected throughout the process. And the policy also states if that's not the case, that would have impacts on being accommodated and recognized as an expert in future meetings.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. We'll now go to Mr. Perkins for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In response, perhaps I could help Mr. Morrissey in response to a recent order paper question the government's response in terms of the education level of those in the department who are DG level and above Mr. Morrissey. Only one of the 62 has a marine biology degree, undergraduate, I believe. Dr. McPherson's is in oceanography, is that correct? Dr. McPherson, you mentioned that in developing the science, you consider multiple points of view, and you just mentioned that you're looking for more and more ways to bring the view of traditional knowledge of First Nations in. But in the case of the closure of the Atlantic mackerel fishery this year, the mackerel fishing groups and fishermen don't believe that their point of view was heard, don't believe that their knowledge about what they've seen and are continuing to see all summer of quite large schools of mackerel, sometimes in places where they aren't traditionally, are being heard by the department. Now, from what I've learned, I think, about the way the science and the way the management or the tracking of it is done by the department, you have two primary sources of science. One is catch data, and the other is the spawning mass biomass data for the survey that's done in June in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So, what are you doing to reach out and understand what fishermen are seeing on the water right now about mackerel, which is very different than what the department's done? And two, how do you assess the stock going forward if one of the two key important parts of your science is no longer there, and that you don't have any catch data whatsoever other than what the Americans are allowed to catch?
Thank you very much for the question. I just wanted to offer very briefly before responding to your question about mackerel that, as you acknowledged, my training is in oceanography. I have members of my management team in the NCR who've got PhDs and postgraduate degrees in marine ecology, in renewable resource management, in genomics. So there are certainly other fields of science that are at play and helping to guide the science program at DFO. Coming to mackerel very quickly, so absolutely, and I agree with you, the input of industry is very important in how we think about data collection, the type of science we do. For a number of years, we've had a mackerel science working group with industry to seek their views on sampling and what they're seeing on the water, how that could affect our sample design, affect our thinking and interpretation. As a result of those discussions, have collected eggs and larvae through additional surveys in Newfoundland to respond to those concerns. In addition, to ensure that we have data that certainly won't replace, but that will augment the data that we've collected from our own science, have worked to secure 70 different samples from across Atlantic Canada for all sorts of biological parameters that will use and drive our modeling exercise that is planned next assessment for early 2023.
Thank you. The fishing industry is concerned that the inability of the department to conduct consistent, ongoing science data, biomass data, stock assessment data is slowly causing the industry to be at risk of losing the MSC certification, which will remove our ability to access markets around the world. And I note that right now only 58% of stocks have a biomass study even available. That's a big factor in trying to determine whether or not you get MSC designation. Can you comment on why the department isn't putting more emphasis on getting to 100% coverage so that we do not lose MSC status in those critical fisheries?
So I certainly can start, and Adam, if you have anything you'd like to add, please invite you to chime in. Maybe just to come back to a comment I made in response to an earlier question about biomass estimates or indices, because I just want to acknowledge that many of our fisheries are managed based on indices that aren't associated with an absolute biomass estimate, and for very good reasons, those types of analyses can inform decision making, adequately and in line with our precautionary approach framework. In the past 2 years, or since 2019, we've increased the number of limit reference point analyses by 14, as well as 12 additional updates for other species. So certainly we continue to use the resources that were provided through the fish stock provisions funding that the department received in 2019 to augment the work we do, undertake new monitoring, and undertake additional assessment work.
Thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Hanley to clue up for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, and just want to give my thanks to all the officials for being here today and for all your work. My questions, at least initially, are for Ms. Murdoch, as Senior Director of the Pacific Salmon Strategy Transformation. Could you describe briefly and high level the work that you're overseeing in the Salmon Strategy Transformation and how this is part of or relates to the PSSI?
Certainly. Thanks very much for that. As Ms. Reid already stated, we do a lot of salmon work across the department, particularly out here in Pacific, but also in headquarters. My new group that's come on board since we launched the Pacific Salmon Strategy last year is really kind of focused on, as a secretariat function, where we sort of work with colleagues and representatives from branches throughout the department that work on salmon work, whether that be salmon science, fish management, enforcement, salmon enhancement. And then we also are looking to launch a new directorate focused on salmon stewardship. So working with external partners, other agencies such as the provincial government and other federal agencies, but more importantly with First Nations, with local stewardship community groups, with municipalities, regional districts, others who are just as concerned regarding the future of Pacific salmon and have a role to play in addressing the declines. So in many ways, there is some direct program delivery I'm responsible for, but very much so it's more about integrating the various resources and capacity within the department and those of our partners.
Thank you. This year we had in the Yukon, the First Nations, the recreational and sport fishing for Chinook and salmon and chum were closed once again on the Yukon River. And also including on the Alaska side as well, as my understanding is, and the chum being the lowest ever recorded, apparently, in terms of that chum run. So I'm just wondering, in view of that, how, and maybe a more general question is how closely DFO works with American counterparts. How consistent are the assessments? What happens when there's a discrepancy, if there is a discrepancy between scientific assessments on each side of the border, and how are these, how do you reach consensus across borders?
Perhaps I could answer that. So we do have a Pacific Salmon Pacific Salmon Treaty between Canada and the U.S., where stocks that cross both countries are managed collectively. And so there is an exchange of information at a technical level by species. So we have a number of panels that meet bilaterally, Canada and the U.S., to talk through issues. And in that way, we can agree on the science going forward. We do have our own domestic processes as well, but we do rely heavily on the Pacific Salmon Treaty in order to address those transboundary issues.
Thank you, Ms. Reid. And a question for maybe either of you, but certainly the current state of the Chinook run in the Yukon River system is quite dire, and projections, I think, are also not looking good, but maybe you can tell me a bit more about that. But also, I'm interested in what scientific assessments tell you about the viability of community-based salmon hatcheries as part of the solution. I know there's a lot of interest in that in our First Nation communities in the Yukon, and I believe in BC as well.
So I would just agree briefly that the situation in the Yukon is, very troubling from a salmon return perspective. With regards to the community enhancement program, that is part of the program that Sarah has an oversight for, and so I invite Sarah to respond more fully.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. As you mentioned, there are a lot of First Nations and community groups looking for at all efforts of how can we best rebuild our stocks and look at hatcheries certainly as one piece of that puzzle in terms of restoration and rebuilding. One of the tricks with salmon enhancement, of course, is doing it in a precautionary way that doesn't undermine what the wild stocks you're looking to protect. So we do have a number of community-run facilities that are part of our salmon enhancement program now. And as the second and one of the key pillars of PSSI, we are looking to increase the capacity and do retrofits to some of the DFO facilities, but also to work with our First Nations and community partners throughout BC, but also in Yukon, to explore places where we could either enhance existing facilities or potentially look at new facilities that could support in that broader effort around salmon conservation. So certainly something that we would be interested in pursuing with the nations in the Yukon, with the understanding, as you acknowledge, that it needs to be done obviously in a way that doesn't undermine or inadvertently weaken the wild stocks that are under threat.
Thank you very much.
And I'll close out by saying a big thank you again to the departmental officials for giving of their time freely today to enlighten us on the perspective of science at DFO. I wish each and every one a happy Thanksgiving weekend with family and friends. And before we actually go, just a reminder, before we adjourn, I'd like to remind members that the committee will not be meeting next week, of course, as it's a constituency week. We will reconvene on Tuesday, October 18th, to hear from witnesses on our study on the North Atlantic right whale. Also, we did not have the time to address drafting instructions for the report on science at DFO today. We will plan for some committee business at the end of our next meeting to do this and discuss any potential travel submissions for the new year as well. So with that, I want to say a big thank you to the translators, clerks and analysts, and hope you all enjoy a Thanksgiving weekend. Meeting adjourned.